Good afternoon to all the participants who are virtually connected to us. A very warm welcome to the webinar on green growth in businesses. I thank you all for showing your interest on the subject and registering for the webinar. I am Aparna Vashisht. I work as a researcher with the policy research area of green growth strategies area at the Energy and Resources Institute. I will be the moderator for the webinar today. The webinar aims to provide an understanding on the context of green growth. This webinar is like a precursor and would set the stage for an extensive 2-day management development program on the subject of green growth and businesses in the month of September this year. I would briefly talk about the management development programs at TERI. TERI has the expertise and strength in offering MDPs in the area of environment, energy, including climate change, energy efficiency, renewable energy, biotechnology, social transformation, sustainable habitat, and knowledge management. TERI's management development programs are certificate programs which have been exclusively designed to enhance the competencies and capabilities to meet the emerging needs of managers, decision makers, and other policy specialists who work in the environment-related issues. Without spending much time, I would now proceed to our session for the day. I would begin by introducing our speaker for the session, Ms. Shelly Kedia. Shelly works as a fellow and with the Green Growth and Resource Efficiency at the Energy and Resources Institute, Delhi. She leads the interdisciplinary policy research area of green growth strategies and is also the editor of the International Journal on Green Growth and Development. Shelly's assignments at TERI include the Initiative on Green Growth and Development, Collaborative Project on Low Carbon Development in China and India, Developing an Action Plan for Green Budgeting in Punjab, Investor's Guidebook to Low Carbon Development in India, and Technical Inputs to the Government of India for the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. Shelly is trained in electrical engineering, finance and management, and policy research. Prior to joining TERI, she was with the Sustainable Development Network of the World Bank in Washington and with the Columbia University Center for Climate Systems Research based at the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York. And the session for today, the pattern of the session would be a presentation by our speaker, Ms. Shelly Kedia, followed by a question and answer, which will be moderated by me. You would be able to post the questions for our speaker on the chat, and we'll consolidate the questions and take them at the end of the session. Thank you very much for your participation, and from here we begin the session. Over to you, Shelly.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome from my end as well. And this webinar is basically on the topic of green growth, and as Aparna said, that it would be basically a precursor to a larger program, a larger management development program on green growth and businesses. So in today's webinar, what we will seek to understand is the larger context at the global level, the country level, as well as in the a little bit in the subnational level as well, which kind of frames the context for green growth interventions. I'd like to keep this presentation more interactive, and we will also be having 2 polling questions in the midst of the presentation, so as to facilitate some kind of inputs from your side as well. And then towards the end, we would be having a question and answer session. So if we generally look at what were the treatises around economic growth and environmental sustainability, what was the thinking that inspired a lot of action, be it in terms of policies or as as well as civil society movements around the world. So a lot of us know of this book, Silent Spring. It was in 1962. Not to say that this was the first book, because if we go back to our own history, for example, Mahatma Gandhi, he was actually one of the pioneers who kind of looked at environmental sustainability. And it was he who had said, and actually that is very much relevant when we talk about economic growth and the pace of economic growth. What Gandhi said was speed is irrelevant if we are going in the wrong direction. But just to kind of have a very broad look as to because 1960s was a time when actually a lot of people around the world started to realize that our wildlife, our biodiversity, our natural resources, they were in trouble. Natural resources were depleting. There was a lot of biodiversity loss, and in fact, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring was one of the key books that kind of also fed into a lot of thinking and a lot of movements at that point of time. And then we had Nicholas Georgescu-Roegen, and he looked at economic processes he applied thermodynamics to it, and he looked at the entropy law in economic processes. Then we had the very famous book, which is called The Limits of Growth, and this was by Meadows et al. And then we had A Common Future. A Common Future was in fact one of the books which was able to mainstream its thinking into global policy. Then in 1989, we also had a book called Blueprint for a Green Economy. And in fact, this was one of the first books that articulated green economy, and most of the discussions actually in this book actually centered around the principles of environmental economics. And in fact, as we know, now this field is very much evolving. You have ecological economics, you have sustainability science, you have a whole lot of transdisciplinary thinking. And one of the books which kind of is also a very pioneering piece is the 1991 book on steady-state economics by Herman Daly. Then, just again, as a refresher, and many of you I know are kind of already converted, sustainable development, in fact, green growth, when we talk about green growth, it is a concept that actually stemmed from sustainable development. And sustainable development, as we know, is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So in a sense, sustainable development contains within it two concepts. The concept of needs, so which means that there are needs in the world of the poor and to which a priority should be given. But then there is also an idea of limitations, which is imposed by the state of technology, and also, most importantly, the environmental's ability to meet present and future needs. And this is where actually, when we talk about limitations, is where, especially in terms of ecological limitations, this is where actually green growth comes in, and we'll look at it more in subsequent slides. So even when one talks about sustainable development, the traditional view is there are three pillars of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. And then, of course, you have governance as a cross-cutting theme. When one looks at the emerging view of sustainable development and tries to look at specific interlinkages between the pillars of sustainable development, then actually a more, an interesting picture emerges. And the intersection of economy and environment can be said to be green economy because it looks at economic aspects as well as environmental aspects. But then there's also linkages between environment and social, so that's called social ecology. So which means the society, implications of environment on social processes as well as society responding to environmental preserving the environment. So, for example, let's say the Chipko movement, even at a smaller scale. I mean, this especially what we see is this is more kind of there at a community scale. And of course, in fact, like not just in developing countries, even in developed countries, now this whole movement around degrowth is bringing out new concepts such as sharing economy, collaborative economy. And if you look at the intersection between the society and economy, then there's social equity, and which means, policies around distributive justice, etc. So, but here what we are going to focus more on is green economy. And again, green economy, again, kind of I'm re-emphasizing, is mostly it's mostly in the intersection of economy and environment. And green economy is a state, and the process to achieve a green economy would be then green growth. So then, so what was the genesis of, where do we actually see the concept of green growth mentioned first time in an intergovernmental discourse? So, well, actually, green growth is articulated the first time in the Ministerial Conference on Environment and Development in the Asia and Pacific, and wherein green growth was articulated more in terms of improving quality of life, which actually needs like cleaner environment and natural resources to be protected. And also there was a linkage between poverty eradication as well as the MDGs. So what triggered green growth at the global level? There has to be, in fact, green growth, in fact, in the policy discourse is not something which we've been actually discussing for a long time. Something happened that triggered the discussion around green growth at a global level. And in fact, the year 2000, there was something that happened in 2008 that triggered this discussion around green growth. So what is it that happened in 2008? What were the drivers of green growth? So firstly, and many of us are aware that there was a very sharp rise in oil prices in 2008. Then there was a financial crisis in 2008, and there was a stronger policy discourse around global environmental issues, which included climate change. And so, in fact, one can say that the year 2008, signified, three drivers: rising oil prices, financial crisis, as well as the recognition of global environmental policy. And so how did individual countries respond to a situation like financial crisis? Because yes, even today in most of the countries around the world, the financial situation and economy are the most important things which government seek to address. So what happened then in 2008? In fact, many countries actually introduced the stimulus package to safeguard the industry, many industries in their countries. But then when looks at the composition of the stimulus package and where the resources in the stimulus were directed, a lot of it was actually directed to also develop green sectors. I mean, within existing industry as well as creation of new industry. So when one kind of breaks down the component of the stimulus package into green sectors, a lot of countries actually saw this as an opportunity because their economies were declining. So they saw this as an opportunity to safeguard their economy. Well, actually, they were not really declining, but they saw an opportunity to develop new industries around environmental sustainability, which they could then develop competency in, and they could actually also tap in newer products, services, and hence they can tap in newer markets. So when one looks at the countries, Korea, of course, was 95% of its stimulus package went into the green sectors. EU 58%, China 33%, and so there were actually countries which were actually looking at the 2008 financial crisis also as an opportunity to develop new economic sectors. Then came the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, or Rio+20. So in that global event, there were two themes that were taken up. One was green economy, and the second was institutional framework for sustainable development. So it was after this 2008 benchmark that the multilateral system also decided to include green economy in a global policy discourse. And in fact, the outcome document of Rio+20, which is called The Future We Want, mentions that each country can choose an appropriate approach with respect to a green economy, which is in accordance with respective national sustainable development plans, strategies, and priorities. So countries were free, and they could take a flexible approach in framing their own green economy policies. And then when one actually just looks at the various articulations that's available, be it by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia or by the Global Green Growth Institute. Global Green Growth Institute was, in fact, formed after the Rio+20, and in response to this growing discussion around green growth. So the three drivers which I was mentioning, be it like the oil prices, or be it like developing new growth engines, or even like low carbon development, all these are kind of found in the various articulations in global policy. So let's say, and the key articulations are OECD, also UNEP and World Bank, apart from GGGI and UNESCAP. And when one looks at, and I'm not going to go too much into detail of reading these out, but the OECD also defines green growth about maximizing economic growth and development while avoiding unsustainable pressures on the quality and quantity of natural assets. Similarly, the United Nations Environment Programme defines green growth as growth in income and employment that kind of reduces carbon emissions and pollution, enhances energy and resource efficiency, and prevents the loss of biodiversity in ecosystem services. World Bank defines green growth as growth that is efficient in use of natural resources, clean in that it minimizes pollution and environmental impacts, and resilient that it accounts for natural hazards and the role of environmental management and natural capital in preventing physical disasters. So, in many ways, one can say that green growth encompasses both local environment issues, global environment issues, but also looks at developing new growth engines, as well as looking at the aspect of economic opportunities. Then, when one looks at drivers of green growth at the national level, what one can say, and in fact this figure that you see on your screens, this is from a study conducted by TERI, and it's called Green India 2047. And the study estimated that in 1997, the economic value due to degradation and depletion was close to 11% of India's GDP. And this includes economic costs due to poor quality of drinking water, that is poor water quality, loss of crop productivity due to degraded soil, loss of wood due to degraded forests, as well as adverse effects on human health due to polluted air. And so the largest cost in this was attributed to human to the cost borne due to polluted air. And so then, in fact, and this is not just India, and there is a growing understanding in countries about the economic implication of environmental degradation. China, for example, environmental degradation is political issue. It's a social issue now. It's very important in China. And as well as like what we see that over the years, the environmental institutions or environmental policies in different countries, and not just like in India, but in different countries around the world, they evolved and various policies were framed. And so that's also, and that's in fact, as a response to green growth, some countries actually even had a dedicated ministry on green development. And an example is Mongolia. And in fact, like that's also one of the countries where Minister would be visiting. If we see in case of India, more recent development is that India has given recognition to green growth. And it's not just green growth, it is poverty eradication and green growth. And what you see on your screen is vision as envisaged by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and wherein the government specifically includes poverty eradication and green growth as one of the aspects in its vision. And it's not just the Ministry of Environment and Forests, but there has been recent policy developments in India around renewable energy and much more ambitious targets for renewable energy to start with, as well as coal cess as an indirect tax measures, as well as going for large scale raising capital through markets such as through green bonds for clean energy projects. So then, what about businesses? What are the drivers of green growth in businesses? So World Economic Forum every year comes out with an analysis which looks at global risks. And in fact, like if you what you see in front of you is a table which lists the top 5 risks from 2007 until 2000, like the most recent report, as listed in the most recent report. And what one sees, in fact, is like now when you see that there are cells which are highlighted in green, and it's very interesting to see that from 2011 onwards, environmental related risks started finding their started being recognized as one of the global risks. And for example, in 2011, amongst the top 5, 4 of them were environment-related risks, be it meteorological catastrophes, hydrological catastrophes, biodiversity loss, or climatological catastrophes. In 2012, rising greenhouse gas emissions as well as water supply crisis was perceived as a risk. And more recently, extreme weather events in 2015 was perceived as a risk. So one can see actually that global environment issues, in fact, also rising oil prices, if you see some of the earlier ones, were seen as a risk apart from extreme weather events, as well as the other part was resource related risk, and one can see water supply has been like sort of listed as one of the risk factors as well. And then there has been a lot of excitement in the business fraternity. Businesses absolutely, as we have seen in the previous table, recognize that environmental related risks do pose a problem for business operations, for the continuity of business operations. Also, businesses see that there is an opportunity of markets for green products as well as procurement. Then national policies are responding to environmental risks as well. The financial sector is responding to to these new aspects of clean energy, and there are several public finance initiatives. Banks are responding, as well as other one sees other market instruments as well. Then the sustainability reporting. This is becoming now like it is increasing in practice amongst the business fraternity. There are other voluntary tools, and for example, even something like for banks, Equator Principles, green labeling, corporate social responsibility. Then there is increasing interactions amongst an increasing body of knowledge emerging on business and sustainability as well. And social enterprises and technology. Technology is a very important driver of green growth in businesses. So now we have, for a change after this, we have a time for a poll. And the question will be flashed on your screen, but just to kind of also sort of, I can recite the same for you, is that, is there a business case for green growth? Yes, no, or maybe. So you will be getting 45 seconds to respond to the poll, and it will come in front of your screen, so please respond.
And the poll question was even more interesting. And we have the result with us for the poll. So 84% people right now who are connected to us through the webinar feel that yes, there is a business case for green growth, and there was not even a single participant who does not think there is not a case. And 16% of the participants are, they think that maybe yes, maybe not. So largely we can see, say, 84% of the participants feel that yes, there is a business case for green growth, very much justifying the webinar that we're having today, and also the larger MDP that we'll have in the month of September. So I think we could get back to the presentation again. Over to you, Shelly.
Yeah. So, okay, thanks a lot, Aparna. And so again, we come back to some more perceptions. And in fact, we did another poll. And this just did not concern the business community, but looked at different stakeholders, including government, business and industry, NGO sector, research and academia, media, and others. And we actually had asked various questions, and in fact it was a mix of both OECD countries as well as non-OECD countries. And so in terms of can low carbon green growth promote inclusiveness? In fact, because there's one big discussion around green growth is whether it would be a compromise on inclusive growth, and we'll come to that discussion a little bit later. And most of 86% of the participants did feel that that low carbon green growth has a potential to promote inclusiveness, and then the question on can it be profitable for businesses? In fact, now, and I think a lot of you are from the business community, and we've got a greater sample from the business community, and it's encouraging to see that 84% of you think that green growth, there is a business case for green growth, and this poll was conducted in 2013. It was conducted in January 2013, and at that time, 67% of people felt, and this was amongst all stakeholder communities, that there is a business case for green growth. Okay, so when one actually looks at priorities around green growth as envisaged by different countries, and this is basically an analysis by Green Economy Coalition, and this is based on the submission of different governments in the Rio Plus 20 process. And when countries actually spoke about the needs or spoke about their viewpoints on green economy, what one sees, and if you look at the blue portion, the developing countries, which include India, actually emphasize more on sustainable development, poverty alleviation, equity, and resilience, as well as participation, as well as economic growth. And the developed countries, on the other hand, paid more emphasis on enhancing competitiveness, accountability, as well as job creation, because in the situation at that time, in their own economic situations was that they also needed to create jobs, and they needed to protect, or they needed to boost their industry, which had been hit by the 2008 economic crisis. So one can see that there is a different that the developed and developing countries do prioritize on different issues. But then what also emerges is that economic growth, as well as poverty and social issues, are important considerations in green growth for developing countries. And in fact, when one looks at technology development in OECD and non-OECD countries, a similar trend, especially regarding competitiveness, emerges. And when one looks at, and this is just an indicative, it's just indicative because this only uses patent data, which itself has limitations. But when one looks at how, like, let's say Germany, if you look at the light blue shade, it's more in transportation, as well as the same is for Japan. So both Germany and Japan have a very strong transport industry. Let's say, we all know German and Japanese cars. So they did innovate regarding fuel efficiency in the transport sector. So they did focus on industries where they knew they had a certain level of competitiveness. Whereas when one looks at on the right side, which is on the divide of the dotted line, which looks at the non-OECD countries, what one sees is that non-OECD countries mostly develop technologies in the field of renewable energy as well as general environment management. And, the other sectors are still kind of developing in developing countries. But yes, there is no as such focus on competitive sectors as such. And it can say that environment and clean environment as well as energy access are very basic needs, and that's where the technological innovations in developing countries were focused on. So we just take an example of two country policies, or articulation on green growth in two countries. So first is Korea, and in fact, if you remember that Korea was one of the countries in which the percentage of green sectors in the stimulus package was the highest. So if we look at the articulation of green growth in Korea, so it is defined in Korea's Framework Act on Low Carbon Green Growth. And the term green growth means growth achieved by saving and using energy and resources efficiently to reduce climate change and damage to the environment, securing new growth engines through research and development of green technology, creating new job opportunities, and achieving harmony between the economy and environment. And in India, in 2009, the 13th Finance Commission, in fact, actually articulated green growth. And the articulation goes as like, green growth involves rethinking growth strategies with regard to their impacts on environmental sustainability and environmental resources available to poor and vulnerable groups. So in Korea, I'll just highlight the terms. So the terms that emerge are new growth engines, research and development, technology, new jobs. And in India, it was more about accessibility of basic environmental resources to poor and vulnerable groups. And then in Republic of Korea, what's also it's important to understand what else was going on in the country. There's a big demographic factor in Korea. There's an aging population, and the policies there also want to respond to these, and they also want to encourage structural changes with more innovation, also leading to more jobs, not just in the manufacturing sector, but also in the services or in the tertiary sector. And also the motivation for Korea was that it wanted to be one of the leaders in global environmental policy. In India, on the other hand, there are very basic issues. You need to have access to livelihood resources, and since a lot of our population is still dependent on agriculture, environmental resources there become very important. And the government also needs to respond that there are poor and vulnerable sections in the population in India. But the situation actually becomes even more interesting when one looks at the subnational level. So just very briefly, and I won't spend too much of time on this slide, is when we developed like two set of metrics, low carbon development capacity metrics as well as adaptive capacity metrics. So actually this figure that you see in front of you this depicts four quadrants. With on one hand you have the high adaptive capacity and high low carbon development capacity, and on the lower end you have low adaptive capacity and less low carbon development capacity. So by low adaptive capacity you mean like your population, they don't have the basic capabilities such as education, gender empowerment, strong local institutions. And by low carbon development capacity you mean like that the government have put in place policies or like are meeting the targets related to renewable energy. Also on the forest side, there has been a positive change in forest cover. And so what one sees, what one would want is to move from the third quadrant to the first quadrant, which is the third quadrant is the low adaptive capacity and low carbon development capacity, to high adaptive capacity and high low carbon development capacity. And when one just does a very simple mapping of where the states stand, so it's a very interesting picture because you see states which are distributed across all the four quadrants. So and what one would want is like all of them to move into quadrant 1, which is high adaptive capacity and high low carbon development capacity. So the point which I'm trying to make is really like when businesses have to look at opportunities at the at the operational scale, they would also have to look at these issues, be it at the national level or be it at the subnational level. And at both the levels, there are challenges, and both at both the levels there are different levels of priorities as well. So businesses need to look at issues, what are the problems in those areas, and like then convert them into opportunities. That is what we are taught in our MBA classes, right? So yes, so I mean, it sounds very simple, but yes, I think businesses have to respond to issues, and it's not just like business should just be looking at only continuity of their operations. Yes, responding to environmental risks is an important factor, but then also looking at issues and also trying to contribute as businesses to address those issues is an important aspect for businesses as well. Now again, before I go on, is time for another poll. And the question this time that would be put forward is, what according to you is the most important enabler for green growth in businesses? So you can only choose one. So it's like, what you think is most important. Is it policy? Is it finance? Is it technology? Or do you really feel that you're also, you have some sort of responsibility towards the environment? So you have four options: finance, technology, responsibility towards the environment, and policy. And your time starts now.
Thanks for the polling question, Shelly. So the result of this is very interesting. Of all the participants who are present with us, 25% feel that it is the policy which is the most important enabler for green growth in businesses. Then around 19% feel that it is the finance, and around 7% of the participants today feel that it's the technology which is the most important enabler. And a large percentage, say 49% of us feel that it is the responsibility towards our environment, which is like the biggest enabler for green growth and businesses. So that's actually very interesting. So would you like to take it forward from here, Shelly?
Okay, thanks a lot for that response, and it's wonderful to see that talking already to a really like huge audience that is converted and that has a big conscience, because most of you, 49% of you, voted for responsibility towards the environment, and then the rest of you like kind of had their priorities amongst the other three. But well, in reality, actually, all of us, if one has to be very honest, as a representative belonging to the business and industry, we really look for enablers around three areas, which is policy, finance, and technology. And I'm really not going to cover the responsibility towards the environment, because I think a lot of it has been covered before, because that was, in fact, the first part of the presentation around the global discourse was a part of that. And I'm going to now kind of go on to the policy, finance, and technology aspect. So what we did was, in a project which was supported by the Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, we conducted a stakeholder needs assessment, and it involved interviews with 298 stakeholders, and it was a structured questionnaire stakeholder interview across different sectors. And there were total 298 stakeholders. And in terms of policy, well, actually four themes came up in policy as according to what the stakeholders needed. So first was guidelines. In fact, that was something which a lot of stakeholders felt that they needed. The other was regulation, and in fact, and the third was incentives, and the last was voluntary provisions. So surprisingly, a lot of businesses didn't really look for a lot of financial incentives from policy making, at least like in terms of larger policy aspects, but looked at aspects such as guidelines as well as regulation, and then followed by incentives and voluntary commitments. So really, a lot of stakeholders felt that there is just a need for guidance, to the business and industry, and so that's from the survey results. Then when one looks at technical aspects, in fact, technology, we just didn't look at technology. Actually, three themes came up. One was technology, the second was advisory, and the third was capacity building. Here, technology certainly dominated, because across most of the sectors, people did feel that there was need for newer technologies that would address low carbon green growth. And then in terms of, then the next important need that came up was advisory, because a lot of people also did feel that they need to really understand as to how to apply technologies, how to connect technologies to, let's say, even let's say something like CDM mechanisms. So they did need also some advisory like support. And finally, capacity building was also something that was important across sectors. So in terms of technology and innovation policy, it's very interesting. And in fact, research and development is actually one of the areas which is an important opportunity for the business. And what happens is most of the technological innovation takes place in the business sector or the other non-government organizations as well. But what happens is a lot of a lot of the finance, in fact, one looks at the scale of finance, actually goes into public institutions. So, in fact, there could be lots of R&D partnerships that could be developed with more public and private collaborations. And also the government here has an important role to play, and they can also incentivize R&D in low carbon space through tax incentives. And in fact, this has happened in countries across the world. And in fact, our neighboring country, China, also has done quite a lot in that sphere. Then comes the financing needs. So here, if you see the cobalt blue line, and so I think a lot of us are still stuck in that subsidy mindset. So a lot of us want subsidies to, and in fact, I think I saw one of the question as to about the financing in long term and short term. And actually, yes, there is need for the feasibility viability gap financing, and it's difficult to imagine a lot of it to come actually from the private sector at the moment. There would be need of public finance to step in, whether be it international finance, be it national public finance, be it state finance, but somewhere there would be a need for diversification of various sources of financing and loans in some sectors. For example, non-renewables, let's say the coal industry, they did feel that it's just that the banking needs to incentivize us more. Maybe we could get like lower interests on our loans or something like that. That could also be sufficient to incentivize us to, let's say, go for our cleaner technologies in our sector. So actually subsidies and loans were one of the top needs, and of course the other one was tax rebates. So there were some, as you can see, that financial incentives do kind of count in terms of, and this is stakeholder needs in India. So in financing, just to sum up, the sources of financing will have to be diversified. So it has to be public finance, it would have to be traditional private finance, which would mostly include the banking sector. It will have to be also public-private partnerships, international climate finance, market instruments, and here you would also have innovations such as carbon markets. In India itself, we have something, and of course that's the success of how it is implemented still needs to be seen, but we have something such as energy saving certificates. But more than that, other instruments which can actually help raise financing, such as green bonds, and there have been, so IREDA is there, we have Yes Bank, and we also have Exim Bank of India that has gone for these kind of financial instruments. And also there is need for a lot more familiarity of the financial institutions itself, about the green growth state. So just to sum up, so in the whole presentation, first what we saw was that over the years, environmental sustainability has been mainstreamed into policy making at global level, at national levels. And what is now required is that, hopefully it gets increasingly mainstreamed into business operations as well. Green growth has been driven by environmental and resource risks, policy, technology, and finance. Limitations to green, so it's not that green growth is a silver bullet. There are limitations to green growth. And for instance, even until now, there has been not a lot of scope for biodiversity conservation, which is also an important issue, as well as social issues like health, education services. They need to be tackled separately. Or you need to actually look at different sets of policies for that. Then in terms of business responses, yes, business responses are needed both in terms of tapping opportunities as well as being prepared for environment and resource risks. Just to come now to the concluding part, and this was mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that this was a small precursor to the next program, which will be hopefully held sometime in September, and it will be a 2-day management development program on green growth in businesses. and it will cover aspects around policies, legal framework, and governance for green growth and sustainable development, financing, role of technological processes and innovation, harmonizing of sustainability in business strategies, triggers for green growth, as well as leadership in green growth. And that's it. Thank you. And we can move on now to the question and answer session.